Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the January 2023 governing body meeting. We appreciate everyone's attendance here in person and all those who are attending remotely. Your interest in this meeting is important to us. Public involvement is really critical to making the process work, and your participation is very valued. At this point in time, I'm going to turn this over to Corporate Secretary Roger Palanton.
Thank you, Chair Konzioka, and let's do the roll call. Chair Konzioka.
Here.
Vice Chair Gardner.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
And Member Prescott.
Here.
Excellent. We have a full membership and a quorum, of course. Before we move on to the next item, I wanted to give a little bit of a note on the public comment process, since we are now here in person and hybrid and have people on the line. And I'll note on that, I think the last time I did this in person, I didn't need reading glasses. So take from that what you will. So for the public comment process, what we do in person is we collect comment cards, and you'll see over to your right on the table, there are comment cards. So if you do wish to make a public comment, you're in the audience, please take a card and fill that out, and we will collect those. And then we will, administer the comments accordingly. For the virtual attendees, like we've been doing for several years now, the operator will instruct virtual attendees on how to enter the comment queue. And then when we actually get to the point of taking the comments, we will do so in order of the ones in the room first. And then after people are queued up, and after those comments, we will take them from online. So just a little bit of a brief introduction on that, and I'm sure we'll make that process smooth as we go. And with that, let me turn over to agenda item number 1 for Chair Konzioka for public comment.
Thank you, Roger. And so first item is to seek public comment, and these would be comments on items that are not on the agenda. So if anyone here in the room has a comment they want to make that's on the agenda, please take the action as Roger outlined. And then Silas, if you can check to see if there are anyone who wants to make a public comment that is participating remotely.
Absolutely. If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialed into our phone only line, please press #2 on your telephone keypad. There seem to be no questions in the queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. Our next item of business is the meeting minutes from the general session of December 13th, 2022. Roger?
Thank you, Chair Konzioka. We have a motion that for the governing body to approve the general session minutes for December 13, 2022.
So moved.
Member
Second.
Decker moved. I'm sorry.
Second.
I'm going to go ahead and, considering we're hybrid, I'm going to go ahead and continue to take the vote and have each member give their vote individually. So Member Campbell?
Yes.
Member Decker?
Yes.
Member Gardner?
Yes.
Chair Konzioka?
Yes.
And Member Prescott?
Yes.
Thank you, governing body. The motion passes.
Okay. Before going to our next agenda item, I just wanted to make a few opening remarks. So if you indulge me, I'd appreciate that. I'd like to note that this is, besides being our first meeting of 2023, it's our first in-person publicly attended meeting in 3 years. And for me, it's the first in-person publicly attended meeting at the ISO offices. So start off, it's wonderful to be here. And I think with everyone agreeing that the last 3 years have been an interesting journey. But we do have a monumental and region-changing decisional items to address tomorrow. And with that being recognized, and all that said, we may want to call this new set of meetings this week after the Star Wars titles A New Beginning. And so I would request everybody to think about releasing that hidden Jedi in all of us. A key part of this, and not to be forgotten, is a big thank you to the ISO staff for all the work in preparation for today. Again, this hasn't been done in a long time, but in addition to that, over the last 3 years, we really appreciate, and that is the entire governing body, that all that has been done to meet our needs, and it's been very effective. So we will begin our meeting with a CEO report, and then after the CEO report, we will receive updates on the latest activities of the Bosher and the RIF. This will be followed by the governing body market expert, who will address 2 of the decisional items on tomorrow's joint Board of Governors and governing body agenda. The first will be the transmission service and marketing schedule priorities phase 2, and the second will be the extended day ahead market. These 2 items are 2 of the governing body's high priority items for this working year. And as a reminder, the other 2 high priority items were resource efficiency evaluation, which was addressed last month, and price formation enhancements, which we expect to see addressed this year. Significant work has been accomplished to develop a draft report on ACR 188. We will receive a summary of the work to date and the information the draft report has identified. And then lastly, staff will provide an initial outlook on the governing body 2023 planning calendar. So this concludes my opening remarks, and I would like to turn the agenda over to CEO Elliot Mainzer for agenda item 3.
Thank you, Chair Konzioka. To governing body members, it's a real pleasure to see you all in person, certainly preferable to over 2 years of Zoom screens. So great to have you all, and to our guests in attendance today, and to all of you online as well. So I wanted just to start out by echoing back to you, not only my deep appreciation for all of the KISO staff, but also the real appreciation to all of you as individuals, your engagement, your leadership, the work that you do, listening to our stakeholders, the diplomacy. It's been incredibly helpful, and to all of the stakeholders who've gotten us to what I think really will be a monumental week. I appreciate the metaphor of taking that next step, another beginning. I think we're all very excited about the decision meetings tomorrow. It's going to be really exciting to just bring all of this work, I think, to a really important point. And I think there's just a lot of excitement, a lot of support to take these next big steps together. And as I think you'll hear us continue to say, we also recognize that we are going to continue working to perfect the union, right? That we know that with our markets, there's always an evolutionary process. I think there's a lot to think about. I think our stakeholders across the board have given us fabulous feedback, both the stuff that's really working and the areas that we can continue to fine tune over time. So you have my personal commitment and the commitment of the whole team that will continue evolving, keeping you posted, staying transparent, and just making real progress, because at the end of the day, we truly are committed to making this a West-wide market that works for Westerners across the region. So thanks again for all of your support and engagement, and to everybody that's participated. Just excited to be here for this important week. I wanted to offer a few, it's been a very, very busy few weeks. There's obviously been quite a bit going on outside of just EDAM and governance. We had I think, a very, very turbulent period of weather over the course of the holiday seasons. Our friends in the distribution patch were significantly impacted by the storms, earthquakes, and our friends right here in Sacramento at SMUD were hugely impacted by distribution system outages. They all did an absolutely fabulous job responding. Very difficult. Nice to see the utility industry rallying together again. And we were very fortunate that through all of that, the bulk electric system held up very well. And so it's been a period of relative stability on our side, of course. That's not something we ever take for granted. We've been in very close touch with all of the distribution utilities and making sure we're there for support, but they've really had to take on the flooding and the weather largely as a team effort in the distribution side. So that's been good. The other thing, of course, we're watching is, as this has been a period of extremely high and volatile natural gas prices, something that has had a significant impact on electricity prices, something that we take very seriously as well. Just to make sure that the markets are functioning effectively. And of course, this has a huge impact on customers. And here in California and across the West, affordability and rates are a very, very big issue for folks in the utility and regulatory community. So we have stayed in touch with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, trying to watch very closely, watch the fundamentals of the market, making sure we understand the pricing dynamics and what's happening. And actually on the 7th of February, the California Public Utilities Commission will be hosting an en banc meeting on the subject of natural gas prices, and the CAISO will be participating as well, representative from the Department of Market Monitoring. So we're looking forward to that conversation and keeping an eye on this very, very important issue. And of course, while we are working through winter dynamics and storms, of course, there's a lot of work going into summer readiness. A lot of work polishing off the resource adequacy assessments going into this summer, taking a look at the supply stack. Of course, we've been fortunate here to see a significant refill of our reservoirs. The hydro conditions are significantly better than they were last year. We have another couple thousand megawatts of batteries on the system, but of course, this is a diverse Western region. We know the hydro conditions up north are different, and so we have to pay very careful attention. And as we get closer and closer to summer, we'll continue to refine our estimates, and also we'll have another round of readiness roundtables and do our table talk exercises, and just make sure that everybody is as ready as possible on the infrastructure and generation side and the demand side going into the summer. As we did last year. And I think the coordination that we saw around September was obviously a critical variable in being able to work through those extreme conditions. I wanted just to cite a couple of other items. Just really honored the week before last to attend a ceremony celebrating the beginning of construction of the 10 West link transmission line connecting Arizona and California. I see Neil Miller over here, one of the many people who worked for years to make that line a reality. It was an absolute pleasure to attend that ceremony with a lot of the people from across the West who'd participated in scoping and developing that line. Another just fabulous piece of interconnectivity between us and the desert Southwest, which I think is really, really important. And then, of course, just absolutely honored to have had the attendance of the Vice President and the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Interior, the White House Climate Advisor, and of course the new Governor of Arizona. It was just a wonderful event, and just another opportunity for us to emphasize just how important those regional relationships are to us and building real infrastructure. Just fabulous moment. We're of course also busy at work finishing off the ACR 188 report back on January 13th. The team, working with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, posted the first draft of that report on our regional solutions page. I think it was a good initial draft for folks to take a look at. We have a stakeholder meeting, giving folks a chance to provide us with some comments on that here into the early part of February. Of course, we have the assignment of delivering that to the California legislature before the end of February. And we know there's a lot of interest and a lot of activity and just a lot of energy, I think, both inside California and of course across the West on the issues that report implicates and the bigger topics of governance and regionalization. So exciting to see that work moving. And I think it's just perfect timing. Just today, we put out our WEIM benefits for Q4 of 2022. I think we knew we were coming up on actually, I think we knew we had passed the $3 billion mark, but I think the final number was about $3.4 billion worth of cumulative benefits. Absolutely fabulous just to kind of see those benefits and accruing to our utility partners, and just another piece of fabulous tangible evidence of the value of West-wide coordination. So really extremely pleased to see those numbers. And then just finally, I'll mention, later this week, as we're moving towards bringing on 3 additional WEIM entities, we'll be going into parallel operations with Avangrid and WAPA Desert Southwest and El Paso. And so those implementations are going great. Khaled and his team and many others working to make sure those go as well as possible. And then we're getting ready hopefully for pop the champagne corks on April 5th with 3 more super valued EIM entities in the market. So lots going on. Again, to our many partners across the West, thank you guys so much for all the work that you've been doing. People really rolled up their sleeves. To the whole team here, my CAISO colleagues, thank you guys for unbelievable amount of work. And again, to the governing body, we just really appreciate your support and engagement. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I'm going to ask the governing body members if any of them have questions for you. And it appears they don't. Elliot, thank you for the remarks. And I'll just add that your note on the 10 Westlink project, I had the opportunity to see those first towers going up. I think I spotted about 10 already erected, and it's going up quickly. It's great to see.
No, it really was. And I know you had a hand in those projects over the years. So congratulations to you along with all the other members of that community.
Yeah. Like a lot of transmission projects in the West, there's a long sordid history, but this one is reaching the finish line. So with that, let's move on to agenda item 4. Agenda item 4 is an update on the body of state regulators. We should be having an update from the boss or chair, and that is the Utah Public Service Commission Chair, Thad LeVar. And is Thad on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and I can now see you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Conziolka. Good afternoon, members of the Western EIM governing body. I have a few updates today from the body of state regulators. First, we have welcomed a few new commissioners to the BOSR this month. Commissioner Houck of the California Public Utilities Commission, Commissioner Thompson of the Arizona Corporation Commission, and Commissioner O'Donnell of the Montana Public Service Commission. And we look forward to their commitment and participation over the coming year. Next, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide a high-level overview of the BOSR's position on both the Governance Review Committee's Phase 3 Governance Review, as well as the Extended Day-Ahead Market Design Policy Initiative. This update is not comprehensive, and I encourage you to refer to our written advice sent last week. Over the course of these initiatives, the BOSR engaged early and often, and our letter is a compilation of prior comments submitted to both the GRC and to the California ISO. In the EDAM Market Design Initiative, the BOSR focused on 2 specific design components of the framework, the EDAM Resource Sufficiency Evaluation and Transmission Availability. In addition to the Governance Review Committee's governance proposal, I will provide a few brief comments on both of these EDAM market design components. First, the BOSR supports the Governance Review Committee's proposed governance structure for the EDAM market in its entirety. The BOSR appreciates the efforts of the stakeholder-led Governance Review Committee and all the participants who helped shape the final EDAM governance design. The BOSR acknowledges that the proposal is a negotiated outcome where no single party received all their desired elements. The BOSR supports the joint authority construct for the EDAM, and particularly the reaffirmation that both the governing body and the Board of Governors must weigh the interests of all stakeholders in the footprint. The BOSR recognizes the fact that there continue to be diverging opinions among stakeholders on the structure and scope of joint authority, but we iterate that the final proposal establishes a workable path forward to determine what falls within joint authority and what falls outside of joint authority. Additionally, the BOSR recognizes that as EDAM is implemented and the scoping test is put into practice, there may be further opportunities to discuss and refine how the scope of joint authority is appropriately defined on a case-by-case basis. The BOSR also supports the changes made to the advisory authority process. These enhancements will enable greater transparency by providing an appropriate forum for the governing body to address critical issues that may affect EDAM entities, but that fall outside of joint authority. Lastly, the BOSR supports the schedule where the governance proposal should become effective once FERC has conclusively accepted the California ISO's filing for the EDAM market design proposal. Next, I'll provide a few comments specific to the extended day-ahead market final proposal. First, I'd like to address the BOSR's position on the resource sufficiency evaluation in the EDAM. This is a foundational component for establishing a robust extended day-ahead market as it builds trust and confidence among participants with varying resource adequacy programs and reliability standards. While many aptly view the EDAM as a step toward a potential multi-state regional transmission organization, with all participants operating under a centralized resource adequacy framework, the EDAM is not an RTO. Accordingly, the EDAM needs a standard rule for resource sufficiency to build trust and confidence that participating balancing authorities will not inappropriately lean on other balancing authorities' resources and related costs. The BOSR has long been a supporter of the RSE concept, both under the Western Energy Imbalance Market and Extended Day-Ahead Market. Based on the BOSR's participation in the development of the Western EIM Resource Sufficiency Evaluation construct, the BOSR acknowledges that the RSC also will play a critical role in the EDAM, where balancing authorities will participate with greater amounts of their resources and transmission. To build trust and confidence in the extended day-ahead market, there needs to be a standard rule that all entities can agree upon before participating in the market, and we believe that the RSC fulfills this role. While there is not unanimous consensus among all BOSTR members about every aspect of the RSE failure consequences, there is consensus that failure consequences should incentivize forward procurement and discourage balancing authorities from leaning on others. Accordingly, there is general BOSTR support for the proposed three-tiered administrative surcharge for resource sufficiency evaluation failure consequences. Specifically, the BOSTR has expressed support for three concepts. First, the use of financial rather than physical consequences. Second, failure penalties should exceed the costs to procure the deficiency in the bilateral market. And third, the penalty should not be overly punitive as to disincentivize participation. The BOSTR asserts that the proposed three-tiered approach balances those three principles. Next, the BOSTR supports the overall framework for transmission availability in the EDAM. We support the proposed buckets framework and underlying pathways for transmission made available to the EDAM. The BOSTR believes greater transmission availability in the EDAM will lead to improved day-ahead unit commitment, economically efficient market outcomes, and greater cost savings for EDAM participants and electric utility customers. Additionally, the BOSTR supports the proposed historical transmission revenue recovery mechanism for transmission provided to EDAM. The proposed historical transmission revenue recovery mechanism can incentivize transmission providers to provide their transmission in the EDAM. However, as we have stated in previous comments, the BOSTR recommends that the California ISO establish a standardized calculation rule for historical revenues and a monitoring process for transparency. Given that accounting methods vary among balancing authorities, it is critical to set a robust rule for calculating each component of the historical revenues to add greater accuracy. Finally, the BOSTR acknowledges that in the long run, the current standard of purchasing transmission may shift. As the EDAM matures and grows, the foregone revenues from third-party sales will be reduced because the transmission will be provided to the market. The transmission will therefore be optimized more efficiently than the status quo currently contracted in the bilateral market. Additionally, with operational cost savings, the market benefits will outweigh the potential decrease in transmission revenues as the market matures. As this happens, the BOSTR encourages the California ISO to consider an eventual phase out of the historical transmission revenue recovery through EDAM as the market changes. This concludes my update for today. On behalf of the body of state regulators, I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for the reminder on the microphone. Chair Lamar, thank you for those remarks and that overview of the comments that are contained in the BOSTR letter. Let me turn to the governing body members to see if they have any questions. John.
Chair LeVar, thanks for those comments. We do appreciate that. I just wanted to recognize the work that BOSTR has done on this. It's always helpful to us when we get input from BOSTR with the myriad of opinions and diversity of the BOSTR. It really helps us. So again, please pass that on to the other BOSTR members, our appreciation.
Thank you, I will do that. And I'm also surprised at the level of consensus that we're able to achieve on a lot of these issues. It's been a good process.
And I'm just confirming that Jennifer Gardner did not have anything to.
No, thank you, Rob. I'm good. Appreciate the update, Bob.
Chair LeVar, with that, thank you. And yes, I think that the governing body does find the comments from the BOSTR very helpful, and we understand the unique challenge that the BOSTR has in bringing the commissioners from across the entire West to develop consensus positions. And I think it means a tremendous amount knowing that there is that much uniformity and that much concurrence. So thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we will move on. Our next agenda item is item 5, and that's an update on the Regional Issues Forum. And presenting on behalf of the RIF is the RIF Chair, Vijay Satel.
Hello, thank you for giving me the time. Greetings to the EIM governing body, all the members, and CalISO CEO President Elliot Mainzer and CalISO staff. I hope you can hear me and see me, though I wish I was not in a sling, but that's the reality right now. Okay. Chair Kanzioga, if I may.
Please proceed. We hear you.
Thank you. So thank you and welcome to the entire CalISO community for meeting in person. My regrets for not being there. I would love to be there, but I have some good news to share and some forward-thinking updates to give. First of all, I want to start by saying a simple statement. Democracy is not possible without openness of thought. I thank Pam Sporberg from PGE, as in Portland General Electric, not Pacific Gas Electric, and also the legacy RIF members who carried the RIF baton for many years, including member Gardner and Cameron Urowski, and many other folks, including Therese Hampton and Tony Braun and many others. But the RIF was given a very unique charge last year to do more, engage more, and be more active. So those were the three words. And so I am grateful to the RIF liaisons, my member sector liaison colleagues, for offering me to help support this role that we've gone through quite a year of transition. So I am giving my thanks first before I get to the real stuff. So the thanks goes to the former RIF liaisons who are in different roles. The thanks goes to the governing body members, especially I really want to thank member Anita Decker, Chair Kanzioka, member Gardner, and John Prescott, for all of you who have said RIF should come up and engage more. So I really want to commend that. Obviously, many of my RIF liaison colleagues are in the room and they will be happy to add more color or perspective, but I have a bit of a going to school and reporting to the principals kind of performance card to present. We had 4 meetings, 2 in person, 4 meetings otherwise, and 1 special meeting in the last year through COVID. And of course, a big thank you to CalISO staff for dealing with virtual meetings. But here's what we accomplished in case people are not aware. I just want to share that we were able to do 2 important things. 1, have a diversity of topics, starting with 2 deep dive presentations from CalISO staff on the policy roadmap. We had a good discussion on market runs. We had a presentation on market monitoring. We had a detailed conversation on stress conditions. We also had an in-depth conversation on seams and what seams means in transmission. I have to admit that the RIF can do better, and we will keep working on doing better. I'm very comfortable in the new leadership with Josh Walter and Meg McNall, who will take over from me. And we have our big meeting coming up on February 8th, where we will take over the new conversation and have some perspectives, which I will like to share, including talking to some folks. I would like to pause for a minute and share also an important accomplishment the RIF has made this year. We submitted our 1 comments on the EDAM in terms of the governance, where we all agreed. We all agreed in some ways, and we agreed especially in a couple of areas where all the sectors feel that the governing body of the EIM and the CalISO Board of Governors should be very aware of. We believe that all stakeholders should have a conversation and an ability to speak if the RIF is empowered this new authority. We want that, we appreciate it. We also believe that the prioritization of the initiative should be a very important focus of the policy roadmap. The EIM RIF engaged in that conversation, created a spreadsheet, we identified our priorities, and we've tried to live up to it and focus on it. We may not have done the perfect job, but we've tried to keep that in focus. Another important thing to remember is that I really commend, and I'm not speaking as a chair of the RIF, which I've tried to do very good diligence this last year, is that the EIM entities and transmission owning entities and consumer utilities have done a thoughtful job in the RIF to look for diversity of thought and perspective, which is very important in our comments that we have presented. On page 2 and page 3 of the RIF comments, we specifically ask for 2 things. We specifically request the GRC committee that proposed the governance proposal to give us feedback where you want our input and how. But we have also requested the governing body, you all, to please engage with us and give us feedback where you want from us way ahead of time before we reach the red light. If we reach the red light and the policy proposal is already ready for approval, it's too late. So I think my colleagues at the RIF will all agree with me in saying, you see problems coming down the road or you have ideas, way before a stakeholder initiative gets formalized, please share with the RIF and we will take it. To that end, we congratulate member Anita Decker for being the RIF liaison from the governing body in her new role. She was super excited and we had her present and visit with the RIF liaisons in the coordination call. And I think everybody was very welcoming to that engagement from the governing body. So we thank you for that. In closing, I just want to highlight another important element. We did not forget the due duties of the RIF. The RIF was initially empowered to be an educational body. It is now being empowered to move into an advisory, brainstorming influence role. It does not mean that we will not give up the core fiduciary duties of the RIF. From what I remember, last 5 years that I have tracked or attended, is that we know and work to understand the operations of the EIM and the future with the EDAM. As you move tomorrow into a big decision-making role, we request the EIM governing body and the CalISO Board of Governors and the EIM community to engage the RIF in proactive ways through your sectoral representations. That's my peers and the liaisons to give us effective feedback so we can be effective in working with you. That's all I have to say, and thank you. And oh, by the way, I should have said, and my term ends on February 8th. I look forward to working with Josh Walter and Meg Nicole, and Josh is in the room if you have questions, but it's been a wonderful experience for 1 year being the lead of this group and working with them in my role back in the public interest community. And it's been an amazing experience and a very thoughtful engagement for future. Thank you.
Chair Satel, thank you for those remarks and that overview. I'm going to check first to see if any of the governing body members have any remarks. Anita?
So I want to just say thank you so much for those kind words. I don't know that we weren't very public about it, I would say, but we have determined that there will be a liaison from the governing body to the Regional Issues Forum going forward, similar to that we have a liaison with the body of state regulators. So you'll see this rotate, but I was excited to do it first. And I just want to say for people that were listening that may not have attended the roundtable discussion that the RIF did, that it was really, really well done. It was good, well moderated. The topics were very meaty. It was informative. And I think it was informative from RIF member to RIF member, as well as the opportunity for us to listen to. And I also want to say, it doesn't mean other governing body members won't be attending RIF sessions. I just happen to have the liaison role more formally, but certainly anyone can reach out to any of the governing body members at any time. So I just want to clarify that and the role. But again, thank you very much for your kind words.
Member Decker, I just want to clarify one thing. Our RIF liaisons are not shy in reaching out to anybody. I can assure you of that. They are super engaged. They're super extroverts. There's no introvert personality there. But I think we all want to ensure there is a formal line of communication as well, which we all value. That's one point I just want to clarify. And second, on February 8th, I will highlight some other perspective or thoughts on RIF and the observations for future engagement, but thank you.
Andy, go ahead.
Thank you, Vijay. I wanted to add that I was able to attend the January 18th roundtable discussion. Also found it very valuable. It was great hearing the stakeholder interactions. It definitely contributed to my thinking on the topics, but also I really appreciated just from subsequent stakeholder conversations I had. It was clear it kind of triggered some cross-stakeholder conversations around some of the issues that were brought up there, and that's definitely what I see as a big value of the RIF, is to increase the stakeholder to stakeholder interactions, as Member Decker just said. So I really wanted to just say kudos for that event. I also appreciate that educational content will still be part of the RIF agenda going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Campbell.
And Vijay, I'll conclude by thanking you for your term as the RIF chair. It is always a challenge in chairing such a wide, diverse group and moving it through this change of new authority and responsibility that was recommended by the GRC. And it certainly appears that everything is on the right track. and that the governing body members are seeing what the GRC was expecting to happen with the RIF. So congratulations are in order, and we look forward to you remaining active, even though you will not be the chair any longer.
Thank you. It has truly been an experience. I owe it to my colleagues who've supported me, and we want to do our best, and I hope the RIF will keep putting the best foot forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, which is a briefing on the transmission service and market scheduling priorities phase 2. This will be done by the WEIM governing body market expert, Susan Pope. And okay, there's Susan. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Konziolka, Vice Chair Gardner, and the other members of the governing body for the opportunity to speak today about my assessments of the CAISO's transmission service and market scheduling priorities proposal. And I have to, hold on, I just got to pop up on my screen. Before starting,
Susan Pope seems to have had internet connection issues. She has dropped off the call.
can everyone hear me?
Oh, there you are now. Susan,
Yep.
just so you know, you got cut out. And
Yes, I don't know what happened there. That was strange. Hold on one second. Everything has gone a little strange on my computer. Okay, here we go. So I'd like to recognize, like others have before me, the tremendous and sustained effort by the California ISO and its stakeholders to get to this point with the wheel-through proposal. All parties devoted a tremendous effort to understanding the transmission scheduling and market scheduling practices in regions other than their own. And I've worked in many, many contentious stakeholder processes, and I'd like you to know that what I saw in your working groups reflected an unusual effort to communicate, to listen, to learn from one another, and to move forward. It was truly unusual. So in my briefing today, I'm going to hit on the most important issues that are covered in a briefing memo that I provided to the governing body last week on the California ISO's wheel-through proposal. In my view, the WEIM governing body should advise the Board of Governors to approve the final proposal. Before stating the reasons for this recommendation, I want to be clear that it rests on the fact that the proposal pertains to what will happen during conditions when the CAISO cannot maintain reliability through the economic dispatch or the curtailment of lower priority schedules. Also, it's very important that even when prorating occurs, high priority wheeling through customers will have to pay for transmission congestion. What I mean by that is transmission costs, congestion charges, whatever words you want to use for it. These are the charges on congested interties and on the congestion on the internal CAISO transmission system. When the CAISO reaches a point of prorating wheels, the price of transmission congestion should be at its maximum. And my hope is that congestion pricing alone will greatly limit the frequency with which prorating might be required. With that being said, I'd like to explain the reasons for my advisory support. First, the proposal provides reasonable and sustainable procedures for WEIM transmission customers to obtain advanced high priority wheeling through reservations on the California ISO transmission system. The proposed market rules align, for the most part, with current practices for arranging for OAT service for bilateral power contracts. That being said, I understand that some parties would like to be able to obtain wheel-through service that unambiguously equates to firm OAT service. In my view, offering priority equal to native load is very significant, though. And in the final proposal, the CAISO responded to stakeholder questions and explained the circumstances under which prorating of both high priority wheels and native load could occur. Based on my experience, I believe that it would require a very significant amount of work for the CAISO and stakeholders to devise a priority higher than what is in the proposal. And if this could be done, there's a likelihood that it would be a limited amount of ATC and quite expensive. The conditions under which a difference between OAT firm service and high priority CAISO wheeling through service need to be identified, and their significance would need to be evaluated. This is something that could be explored through a side project, but I don't think it can be completed in time for implementation prior to the summer of 2024. The second reason for my advisory support is that it does not unreasonably hinder the operation of the CAISO electricity market. However, compromises are evident here too. In this regard, I've particularly noticed compromises to protect the potential degradation of existing wheel-through reservations. If in the final proposal in particular, the CAISO has explained how the capacity procurement mechanism, that is CPM imports, would be restricted from eating into or degrading the transmission service previously awarded to wheeling through customers. That final proposal also guarantees that the total allocated ATC will not exceed the total transmission capacity of an intertie. Finally, the CAISO has made it clear that it will limit increases in the TRM, the transmission reservation margin, to available ATC. Now, these 3 points that I've just mentioned are fairly technical points, I realize, but I think that they're important from the perspective of EIM customers who are seeking wheeling through service on the California transmission system and need to understand under exactly what circumstances it could potentially be prorated. A third reason for my support for the proposal is that it appears to be consistent with other existing elements of the EIM market. I would like to note, though, that the priority of EDAM schedules will need to be addressed when EDAM begins, and this could entail another revision of the wheel-through market rules. So the proposal under EDAM, which we'll be talking about next, but I won't be talking about this particular rule, is that EDAM schedules will have equal priority to native load and to high priority wheel-throughs. A fourth reason for my support is that wheeling through priority is awarded for at most a year at a time, which will make it relatively easy and quick in principle to adjust the market rules as experience accumulates. And finally, because the results of the market rules will very significantly depend on the setting of parameters such as the TRM, I appreciate the inclusion of a market rule requiring an open and transparent meeting or process to review these parameters and other aspects of the market rules at least yearly. This can address concerns about equity, reliability, or market efficiency as they arise. So this is the basis of my support for the governing body to provide advisory approval of the proposal. It offers an almost complete roadmap to significantly improve and clarify access to wheel-through reservations and to how these reservations will be treated during operations. In considering my recommendation for advisory approval, I advised the governing body to consider two issues in particular that I'd like to briefly mention. First, the proposal applies two policy decisions in the rules for allocating intertie ATC to wheel-through customers. First, the first policy priority is that wheel-through requests are supposed to be made by customers with existing or contingent power contracts that will be utilized to serve load in conjunction with the awarded wheel-through service. Additionally, the assignment of ATC for an intertie is intended to be made in order of the hourly duration of the requesting customer's power contracts. So these two policy rules are intended to rule the order in which ATC is granted to parties requesting priority wheel-through reservations. The problem I see and describe in the memo is that I don't think the market rules will necessarily achieve the results that appear to be desired by these policy guidelines. That is, for customers with long duration contracts to serve load to have priority in the assignment of ATC for valuable interties. On many interties, the market rules will probably work as intended. However, if they're interties where the value of prorationing priority exceeds the cost of the WACC paid for a reservation, the intended priority might not result. As I explained, the market rules do not contain enough teeth to fulfill this intent. And to me, this suggests that the CAISO is possibly not fully committed to achieving this result, or possibly understands how difficult it will be to effectuate it. As a second point, in considering my recommendation to the governing body concerning their advisory opinion, I suggest they consider the market rule under which wheel-through customers could lose access to monthly ATC that has been reserved for them if they do not contract for energy and reserve the ATC by 30 days before real time. I took a fairly close reading of the proposed market rules in order for me to understand that if California load serving entities request ATC at the T-30 period, that is 30 days before real time, for an amount of ATC, for an amount above the amount of ATC that's been reserved for them, they could be assigned unreserved wheel-through ATC at that time of the proposed true-up. I think there's a potential rub point here, though. And perhaps I missed discussion and agreement on this particular market rule as I was reviewing stakeholder video conferences. The rub point that I see, to be specific, is that I understand that the California LSCs might need some of this extra ATC capacity that was assigned to the wheel-through customers during the rolling 13-month process to support resource adequacy contracts 30 days in front of the dispatch because of California procedures, which are outside the CAISO control, for demonstrating RA sufficiency. However, one thing I'll note is that the proposal to potentially use wheel-through ATC at the T-30 period is not limited to RA contracts. Looking at it from the other perspective, the proposal could unduly pressure wheel-through customers to contract in advance for monthly power so as not to lose the opportunity to obtain a priority ATC reservation. At a high level, the need for additional priority wheel-through reservations made daily rather than monthly is evident as many types of uncertainty will become clearer in the days before real time. So it's very reasonable from this perspective for potential wheel-through customers to want all of their unreserved monthly ATC to be available for daily reservations until maybe the final day before dispatch. So those are the two issues that I've offered up that it would be my particular recommendations for issues for the governing body to consider carefully in deciding their advisory opinion. The final pages of my memo contain specific suggestions to the governing body about what they ask the Board of Governors to require to be monitored or possibly changed in the wheel-through market rules prior to tariff submission. I'll mention just a few of these. The first two, I believe the CAISO agreed to in a recent briefing. These are, first, to ensure that changes to TRM during the year do not have the possibility of degrading monthly wheel-through reservations that have already been made for the year. Secondly, my suggestion was to release extra TRM as uncertainty is resolved moving toward real time. This suggestion originated with a memo from the DMM back in June of 2022. The DMM was recommending that the CAISO request additional flexibility to be conservative a year in advance in the amount of TRM it reserves for uncertainty, but that as it moves toward real time, it released TRM for reservation by the LSEs or by wheel-through customers as various sources of uncertainty are resolved. My final point is that I do not think the additional explanation in the final proposal has fully addressed requests by market participant for explanations of the conditions under which load conformance could cause prorating of existing wheeling through reservations. The CAISO in the final proposal addresses how that prorating would occur if it had to occur, but it doesn't address the question of why and how load conformance could lead to a situation in which that prorating might be required and what the appropriate treatment of wheel-through reservations would be in those circumstances. So you'll find at the end of my memo that I've stated my recommendations as clearly as possible at the request of the governing body. But my view is that it's up to the governing body to shape how these recommendations are proffered to the Board of Governors, whether they're proffered as suggestions to be stakeholdered, for example, subject to further board approval, or simply as things that need to be fixed prior to the tariff filing. This concludes my comments. If I haven't discussed a major issue or something in my memo, please assume that I'm comfortable for the most part with the CAISO's proposal, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
Susan, thank you for the briefing, the overviews, and the emphasis of the most important elements out of your memo to the governing body.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry. At this point, I'm going to with the governing body members to see if they have any questions. John.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. And maybe you already covered this point in some of the details, but the use of the historical 2-year look back to reserve transmission capacity at the intertie for the California native load, does that strike you as normal practice, or any comments on that?
I think that's a very reasonable approach, given that some starting point is needed. In my mind, that resonates very closely with practices that have been used in the allocation of FTRs. So while here it's being used to determine ATC reservations for native load, in very similar stakeholder processes used for allocating FTRs, that kind of approach has been used to determine native load claims to FTRs. So I think it's a very reasonable approach, and I also agree with the the addition as of the final proposal that would enable LSEs to demonstrate that they have new contracts since that have been written since those historical periods that would require them to have different ATC than the ATC assigned to them through the historic process.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I'm just going to check. Andy, do you have any questions or comments?
Just a comment, thank you, Susan, for providing this analysis. Find it very helpful, especially appreciate the ideas for, monitoring, which would, certainly critical to keeping an eye on anything that's implemented here and how to make any further adjustments. But thank you for the analysis.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Jennifer, I can't see you, so I'm going to just check. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thanks, Rob. No, Susan, again, I'm going to echo the comments that have already been shared by, John and Andy. I think this opinion was very thorough, very helpful. Appreciate the summary that you provided to us today, as well as to our stakeholders. And at this time, I don't have further questions. And again, thanks again for your update to all of us today.
Susan, before we conclude and go to public comment, I do have one or two questions. And I'm going to apologize for the first one because I believe that you stated this a few times, but I just want to make certain I go through that. And that is you're recommending to the governing body for approval. You do identify some areas of either issues, improvements that should be addressed. Based upon your review and reading, do you see that all of those recommendations are potential or possible without any other changes in the overall proposal, and that they're relegated or delegated into the detail area? Or do you see that some design changes are needed to be able to accommodate or implement any of the recommendations?
I see this in the slide 8 that you're looking at under the header recommended conditions to be included in advisory approval. I see all of the specific recommendations that I make there as things that can be implemented subsequent to approval. I'm confident that those are things that the CAISO and, in some cases, possibly working with stakeholders can determine a solution for. I don't see any of them as so difficult that, they would require an additional appearance before the board or any kind of additional vote. I think that they are amenable to fairly direct resolution and don't invoke kind of untying major elements of the proposal. They're very specific.
Susan, thank you, and I appreciate that. And again, I believe that's what you had stated, and I just wanted to make certain that I understood that clearly, and that way there's no misunderstanding on my part.
Yeah, so, no, I don't think I did. So that was a good clarification.
Okay. With that, Susan, we'll move to public comment. So I'm first going to check, are there any public comments here in the room? Okay, just so you know, there are no public comments here in the room. So we will now go to those attending remotely to see if they have public comments. Silas, can you check to see if there are any members of the public that want to make a comment?
Absolutely. As a reminder to our attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom located at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialed into our phone-only line, please press #2 to enter the comment queue. We have one caller in the comment queue. You have been sent to unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Bonnie Blair. I'm an attorney that represents the cities of Anaheim, Azusa, Banning, Colton, Pasadena, and Riverside in California. They are all load-serving entities within the CAISO. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Bonnie, go ahead.
Great. So I first of all, I want to say to Ms. Pope that I thought the opinion was very thorough, well written, clear, and generally balanced. But I do have concerns with the recommendations at the end on conditions for the governing body recommending that the CAISO board approve the proposal. And those concerns are both substantive and process concerns. And I'll start with the process concern. The process concern is that the recommendation or the opinion came out very late in the game. It was not posted until Friday, although it was dated January 24th. It wasn't publicly available until the 27th. And our group, the Six Cities group, did submit a letter to the governing body and to the Board of Governors. And we apologize that it was also submitted very late, but that was inevitable given the date of the opinion. We disagree strongly that the conditions that Ms. Pope recommends could appropriately be implemented or included as modifications to the proposal without a further stakeholder process. And in particular, items 3 and 6, we believe are significant substantive modifications to the proposal that we would disagree with strongly. For example, the T-30 true-up process that the proposal includes allows California LSEs or CAISO LSEs to add additional contracts at that T-30 point. And Ms. Pope mentioned the need for external entities who would like to have wheeling reservations to have flexibility in arranging additional wheeling reservations. I think she said up until the day ahead. And that need for flexibility and being able to procure additional resources exists to an equal degree for California LSE, who also may find as real-time approaches that they need to go out and get additional resources. So we don't think that's a fair trade-off, her recommendation. In fact, the effect of making the modification that she proposes would be to lock California LSEs into their share of ATC 13 months ahead of time. We have an issue with the fact that California LSEs don't have an opportunity to request additional ATC on a rolling basis, the way that external entities can seek reservations. So we believe we would strongly oppose the recommendation on a substantive basis, but in addition, we particularly believe that it would be inappropriate to modify the proposal at this stage without having a further stakeholder process. We wouldn't object to considering that modification on a going forward basis as part of a later stakeholder process. I would venture we would disagree with it, but we wouldn't object to considering it. But we do believe it would have to come back to the governing body and the Board of Governors. We don't think this could just be an implementation issue.
Hey, Bonnie, thank you for the comments. And I would like to note that I do know all the governing body members have received your letter and have gone through it. And again, we appreciate that. I think it was very helpful. Let me just clarify a few items. One is the posting of the original guidance memo from Susan Pope to the governing body members was posted on the website, and it was posted on, and was it the 24th or 25th? As per the date of the memo, and it was under the governing body portion of the website. I do believe that there were some issues on getting it posted everywhere. CAISO staff was trying to, I think, post it at 4 different locations. And so your access to it may have gotten a little bit later because of where it was being looked at. And I'll just say I apologize if that was the case, because our intent was to make certain it got posted at all the different places any stakeholder might look at it for it at the same time. And if we failed on that issue for any reason, then please accept my apologies on that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the explanation. And where I looked for it was on the initiative webpage.
Yeah, it wasn't there.
And I saw it first on the 27th. So it didn't occur to me to look elsewhere at that point.
Yeah, we understand that it's tough when you get this information late, and we have the same issues when we get the letters late, and because we like to have them in plenty of time as well. So we understand the constraint, and we also would like to have had the opinion sooner, because it would be helpful. But when we back up, the final proposal had to be issued first, and then developed. And then the other part, and I think you've probably heard my continuing dialogue on this, is when we brought our market expert in and made this a priority, she got brought in at the end of the process and not the middle. And so some of these issues, it certainly may have been brought up earlier, but didn't. And what we have asked our market expert to do is just provide her opinion to us. And that doesn't mean that any of the governing body members has to agree with any of the opinions, but at least we have that input and that guidance. And I know that regardless of what we do with it, we appreciate it because it's helpful. And then I think also I wanted to clear, I may not have been very articulate in my question to Susan on the issue of I'll say the redesign or that part. And I didn't mean to imply and ask Susan to opine on should CAISO staff look at implementing any of those changes, that they would just accept them and move forward, and it wouldn't be a public process. That would be their choosing. And Susan is providing the guidance to us. And what I was really trying to obtain from that question was, if we were to approve the proposal that is before us, and we advice, yeah, I'm just being corrected, and that's correct. The guidance to us. I got distracted here for a moment. My point of the question was there any reason, in her opinion, if it needed to come back to us for other interaction, as opposed to if we were to approve the proposal, would it be done at the staff and stakeholder level and not within the governing body reinitiating this? And so, again, if I was not clear on that question with Susan, I apologize. But I do think I'm clear now on that. And I do know that your letter will be addressed tomorrow, along with all the other letters. And so I suspect that you'll want to call in as necessary after the presentations and discussion. So with that, I'm not going to.
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Could I maybe offer a process suggestion? going forward. And by the way, I do want to acknowledge that this initiative it has been quite contentious. It's maybe one of the most, well, certainly in the upper region of contentiousness of any that I've ever been involved with. And it has been something of a moving target. And so I understand that Ms. Pope was wrestling with revisions that were going on and you know, couldn't necessarily have produced her opinion any sooner than she did. I don't want to sound critical, but on a going forward basis, what the Market Surveillance Committee for the CAISO does is, when it's at all possible, they try to publish a draft opinion, and then they hold a web conference to discuss their draft opinion, and they provide an opportunity for stakeholder input into their draft opinion. And that can be very useful. And I think it would benefit the process if the WEIM market expert could offer that sort of an opportunity for stakeholder input to opinions as well. You didn't ask me for that, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Bonnie, thank you on that. And just so you know, after we complete agenda item 7, we have a few remarks we'll make on process. And two things on that is we're continuing to learn how we integrate the governing body market expert. We are learning, and then we're modifying and trying to prove it. 2, we are familiar with the MSC process, and that is a stakeholder process that they use. And just so you know, we're not looking at going down that path. You know, this just happens to be the market expert's expert opinion and guidance to the governing body, and it only reflects her perspective and not the opinions or perspectives of anybody else.
For the opportunity to speak.
So.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yep. So thank you. And so I'm going to check now. Are there any other public comments?
There are no further comments in the queue at this time.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 7. And this is another briefing by the governing body market expert on the extended day ahead market. So Susan.
Thank you. Give me just a second to get set up here. Okay. So thank you again, Chair Konziolka, Vice Chair Gardner, and other members of the governing body for the opportunity to speak today about the EDAM proposal. Stakeholders sent many letters expressing their support for the EDAM initiative. And like many of them, I think the EDAM provides a tremendous opportunity to increase reliability and market opportunities, decrease costs, and integrate renewables in the Western interconnection. I'm very encouraged by all of the progress that has been made and see the proposal as a huge step forward. I want the EDAM effort to succeed. So the governing body gave me free rein to review all aspects of the proposal and asked that I use my judgment in selecting issues to bring to their attention. That's a lot of material to process, cover, digest, and decide what to highlight. So what I'd like to emphasize is that there are many, many good and strong elements of this proposal that I am not going to be mentioning here. What I'm going to be bringing up and emphasizing are a few things that I am concerned about and would like to bring to the governing body's attention. But I don't want the emphasis to cause people to lose sight of all of the good aspects of this proposal. So my overall opinion is that the final proposal is a significant step forward toward establishing a voluntary day-ahead energy market to benefit participants by optimizing the EDAM unit commitment and balancing area transfer schedules. It maintains agreed upon BA independence that was established with the WEIM. It doesn't require a common resource adequacy construct, and it accommodates both ode transmission reservation and scheduling practices, as well as transmission scheduling via the California's ISO's bid-based centralized energy market. However, I have not recommended unqualified approval of the proposal because there are a few elements that, in my view, need to be further explained and reviewed in order to determine whether the proposal will consistently support competitive outcomes and reliability and cost minimization objectives. My recommendation to the governing body is to support continuing work on the proposal, and the governing body will have to decide whether and how to nuance my suggestion. Whether that means that there are certain elements of the proposal that need to come back to the governing body and the Board of Governors for approval, whether there's certain elements that need to be stakeholdered and reach a stakeholder consensus. I'm leaving it to the governing body and their understanding of the process and what works well to determine how to effectuate my recommendation here. So in my view, 3 elements of the proposal need additional explanation and perhaps conceptual development before the impact on EIM market participants can be sufficiently assessed. While the overall approaches described in the proposal are strong, in my experience, the devil can be in the details, and especially in particular types of details. And these determine whether there are flaws that could be severe enough to cause adverse outcomes or the suspension, perhaps, of market operations. So while sincerely lauding the efforts reflected in the proposal, I'd like to bring some issues to the attention of the governing body. So here, could we please skip to slide 19? So the first several issues pertain to the resource efficiency evaluation. Clear and stringent RSE rules are essential to the success of the EDAM, as several people have previously remarked today. The EDAM balancing areas can benefit from pooling uncertainty risks and economically sharing supply resources and transmission capability, but they have to have confidence that the sharing is not going to degrade the reliability of service to their native loads or increase the cost of service for their native loads. These concerns have to be clearly addressed in the EDAM RSE rules for compliance and for penalizing EDAM RSE failure. Furthermore, the application of the WEIM RSE to BAs who have passed the EDAM RSE needs to include the priorities and procedures for real-time treatment of the failure of the WEIC by the EDAM balancing areas. Next slide, please. So I'm going to raise 3 specific issues with respect to the resource efficiency evaluation. The first is that since the EDAM BAs accept interdependency in ensuring reliability, it's not clear to me why the RSE rules do not account for resource-specific reliability differences. Now, this is an issue that the RTOs and ISOs have struggled with mightily in their capacity markets. It's a really tricky issue. but it's an issue that rises to a new level of importance when we're talking about the EDAM in comparison with the WEIM, because much, much more capacity is going to be shared in the EDAM than it is today in the WEIM. So the final proposal doesn't consider the reliability of a balancing area's resource efficiency value resources other than to ensure transmission deliverability to the BA. So it doesn't specifically consider the relative reliability of a very old unit, for example, that needs some maintenance versus a brand new unit that has been recently inspected and is not expected to have any failures anytime soon. So the result of this, for example, is that a balancing area with less reliable RSE resources would share under the EDAM the imbalance reserves of other EDAM balancing areas, although its reserves would contribute less to the reliability of the EDAM pool. So this means that a BA with less reliable resources could potentially lean on the EDAM pool as a whole. The other EDAM BAs in the pool would bear the costs if, as a pool, they fail the WEIM RSC because of the lower reliability of a particular balancing area's less reliable resource. So this is a difficult issue. I was kind of surprised not to, see other parties mentioning it. I think it's something that is going to start arising as and to start to be discussed more as the EDAM approach is being implemented. So I wanted to raise this to the governing body's awareness. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, slide 22, please. Yes. So the second RSC point is one that both the MSC and DMM have pointed out. And it's that the market rules still aren't sufficiently clear. And here, it's not clear that any additional conceptual development is needed. It's possible that just additional clarity and explanation are needed to explain the consequences of the EDAM balancing area pool failing the WEIM RSE. The proposal simply states that the usual WEIM consequences would apply if this were to occur. But I think it bears explaining exactly what that means. Would the ISO restrict the real-time imports of all of the EDAM BAs individually, for example, or of the EDAM BA pool as a whole? Or alternatively, is the expectation that the BA pool might elect to receive emergency imports and somehow share the cost of the emergency imports? I think it needs to be clear which of those alternatives, or perhaps something else, the CAISO is anticipating would apply if the EDAM pool were to fail the WEIM RSE. And I think it's important that these explanations occur because they affect the potential costs of joining the EDAM. In order for parties to evaluate whether or not to join it, they need to understand what costs and benefits they're going to get out of it. So next slide, please. In a similar vein, the proposal doesn't sufficiently explain how the ISO models and procedures are going to address situations in which the resource insufficiency of one of the EDAM balancing areas goes further than causing the WEIM pool to fail the RSE tests, but actually causes a power balance violation of the BA pool. So the ISO has stated, I've heard them state more than once, that any loss of load would be isolated to the EDAM BA with the resource insufficiency. So in this case, there would not be a sharing among the EDAM BAs of the consequences of resource insufficiency. If load needs to be curtailed, the proposal is that it would be isolated rather than being shared among the EDAM balancing areas. And the final proposal provides an example of this. But neither in discussion nor in the proposal is there a conceptual explanation about this, how this outcome would reliably occur to allocate load shedding dependably during real-time operation when load shedding is required. And there are some complicated scenarios under which this could occur. And I think that there's a need to understand how those will be addressed to be confident about how the load shedding responsibility is going to be passed out. So for example, if it could be that the resource insufficiency is jointly caused by two balancing areas, that it wouldn't occur if it weren't for the resources insufficiency of both, causing a power balance violation. I mean, there the answer seems pretty clear to me that somehow the load shedding responsibility would be allocated between the two. But even if that were to occur, there's a need to explain how that allocation would occur. How would it be apportioned between the two? And then there are complicated scenarios. The last one on the page actually comes from the Department of Market Monitoring, which is what if the resource sufficiency occurs in a balancing area who's exported to another balancing area in the IFM and has scheduled exports in the IFM to enable a second BA to pass the EDAM RSC. You know, there's an equity issue there. Should the balancing area who exported in the IFM and whose EDAM exports are supposed to be firm, should it bear the load shedding responsibility in real time? So I think there's some kind of scenarios to explore and to explain a little bit better, and to perhaps have some, general principles that can enable understanding of how these situations would be handled as a general matter. So let's see, skipping forward now, let's see what slide we're going to. So the next, moving beyond resource efficiency, I raise one specific issue with respect to the transmission scheduling rules that concern me, because I've seen this problem in a number of other regions, and it can be very disruptive to the operation of an orderly market. So this is that the transmission scheduling rules, with the potential to alter grid capacity following the closure of the day-ahead market, in other words, following the completion of the IFM, need to be closely monitored. And the ISO has clearly stated and recognized the need to do this. But I remain a little bit concerned about it. So I'll explain why. The proposal allows the following things to occur after the IFM. OAT transmission reservations can be scheduled, if practicable, and by redispatch if necessary, following the closure of the IFM. Secondly, there can be changes to the injection locations for WSPP Schedule C contracts. So both of these things, in effect, modify the power flow in the solved IFM case that is intended to flow into the WEIM as a starting place for the WEIM, right? So the IFM schedules are intended to replace the base schedules that today are being used in the WEIM. So the problem here is that there are opportunities after the operation of the market to allow for transmission scheduling requests without additional charges made to the transmission customer in order to honor current contract terms. Next slide, please. So, in my view, the proposal requires additional information about how redispatch will accommodate OAT transmission schedules submitted after the IFM, but before real time. So the ISO has stated a number of times that it's going to redispatch as much as possible to accommodate these schedules as it's required to, as much as is practicable. But it's not clear exactly what that means. And here, Rob, by the way, thinking about your question on the prior presentation, I think this element of clarifying this aspect of the transmission scheduling rules is something that can be kind of cut out and improved on without, it's not going to entail changing other things in the proposal to try to clarify the issue I'm talking about here. But here's how complicated I think some of the questions are that arise in this area. For example, will the ISO cut non-firm transmission service, such as economically scheduled IFM transfers, to accommodate firm OAT service? I think the ISO has indicated, well, at least that was my understanding of what they said, that they would do that to accommodate firm OAT service that is scheduled following the close of the IFM, and that the redispatch costs associated with that would be allocated to the EDAM entity that sold the transmission service. The second question, if many OAT schedules are submitted after the IFM, how will the ISO determine which can be accepted? So suppose that, 5, 10, 12 parties request to schedule their OAT services after the IFM, and some, but not all of those OAT schedules can be accommodated with redispatch. Many, in concept, it's possible that, it's possible to accommodate this 5 of the schedules, or this 7, or this 9, or this 8. So there's possibly many different combinations of the different schedules that can be accepted, but not, and those different combinations could be quite different from one another. How's the ISO going to choose which of those to accommodate through redispatch? And if there are multiple OAT schedules submitted after the IFM, how is the ISO going to determine which of the redispatch costs to associate with each OAT transmission schedule? So you can imagine that if it decides to accommodate 8 different OAT schedules submitted after the IFM, that there'll be a pot of redispatch costs as a whole that are required for those 8 schedules. But it's like in any dispatch, it's really very, it's impossible to say, well, those particular redispatch costs are associated with that schedule, and these other redispatch costs are associated with that schedule. So I don't think that it's impossible to solve this. You might just be a, pro rata rule as far as the redispatch costs go. But I think that it needs to be specified. The The final thing is one that particularly concerns me, which is, could the redispatch cause new transmission constraints to bind in the EDAM schedules that are subsequently passed to real time, as long as the redispatch honors firm EDAM schedules? So if it causes new transmission constraints to bind, in effect, it is possibly causing, or almost certainly causing, predictable changes in EIM prices. And this is where you get into the possibility of gaming that could occur because of this late submission of schedules. And this is the thing that I have seen happen over and over again through different loopholes in the market rules in other ISOs and other RTOs, and that needs to be thought through. So next slide, please. So I think that in order to really fully evaluate the impact of post-IFM schedule changes on the functioning of the EDAM and the possibility of gaming, we need further information about how exactly the schedule changes are going to be addressed. And we need to ensure that there is not a possibility of exploitation of relatively risk-free profit opportunities that could be garnered by causing relatively predictable changes to real-time prices through these post-IFM activities. I think there also needs to be consideration of exactly how high we want the redispatch cost to be that the ISO might incur in order to accommodate these schedules during tight system conditions. And there are also possible reliability impacts. If these kinds of schedules are, it's possible that these schedules are being requested after the IFM because it is a way to really get at scarce transmission capacity without having to pay congestion costs for it. So that's my second point with respect to some pretty focused concerns about transmission scheduling. So next slide, please. So finally, I have concerns about the greenhouse gas model that's been proposed by the CAISO. I think just, probably everybody knows this, but it took me a while to really just fully absorb the fact that the greenhouse gas model is central to the success of the EDAM. It is not an after-the-fact accounting procedure. The greenhouse gas model is going to change the way all of the scheduling and dispatch models used for the EDAM and WEIM work. It's going to change the dispatch. So it will have a material impact on Western electricity prices, on which non-greenhouse gas resources are deemed to supply greenhouse gas load versus non-greenhouse gas load. This is a really big deal. The problem is that the greenhouse gas issue is so complicated that there's no correct modeling approach that can be developed based on economic principles. That, we can't ask the CAISO to go develop a proof that, with lots of variables and subscripts, that this is the optimal way to model greenhouse gases in the IFM or in the dispatch. The fact is that decisions about modeling assumptions need to be made in this greenhouse gas modeling, and these entrench equity and policy trade-offs, such as between the price of greenhouse gas credits and the amount of secondary dispatch. This is a real area where, I think policymakers really need to come together to decide how much increasing costs of electricity in California are you willing to bear to trade off against reducing secondary dispatch? These are big interregional questions here that are getting played out through in the guise of in the form of very technical assumptions that are being made and proposed for the greenhouse gas model. Next slide, please. So I don't think, well, at least in my view, there is sufficient information to assess the reasonableness or implementation of the specific greenhouse gas model proposed by the CAISO. The overall objectives that CAISO is pursuing, which is to minimize costs while also minimizing secondary dispatch, that I agree with, but you can't minimize two things at the same time. And that's where the policy trade-offs come in and are expressed through the modeling assumptions. So there's not adequate support at this time for some really central modeling assumptions. And in the, the December 19th, even, I think it was the MSC, maybe the MSC meeting, there was a lot of ongoing stakeholder and MSC discussion about these modeling assumptions. For example, about whether, this is very technical, about whether the counterfactual for the greenhouse gas region should be optimized for the region as a whole, or whether it should be optimized individually for each non-greenhouse gas balancing area individually. There's ongoing discussions about the application of the proposed balancing area level net export constraints in the IFM. These net export constraints have been proposed by the California ISO to limit secondary dispatch, and they will reduce secondary dispatch, but they won't eliminate it. And they are going to significantly increase the cost of electricity and of greenhouse gas credits. So we don't have really good modeling results at this point to illustrate what the size of these impacts will be. Furthermore, the software implementation, as I understand it, of the remote model that has been proposed is under development, and key technical assumptions need to be studied. They're not known at this point. We can't evaluate them at this point. And these determine how the model's solved and what the prices are going to be. And we don't know how replicable this model is going to be, whether it will consistently produce reasonable results. These things just haven't been tested right now, to the best of my understanding. Next slide, please. So, I think my suggestions here are consistent with my reading of what the MSC has said, which is that there's a real need for further empirical results in order to evaluate the proposed greenhouse gas model. As I said, I don't think we can evaluate it analytically. We need the results of model runs for alternative model designs under multiple scenarios. The stakeholders in MSC have suggested alternate model assumptions to those I described on the previous page. They question how much improvement certain proposed modeling assumptions will actually bring in the majority of circumstances. And we just can't know the answer to that without having more results. The final point on this page is just to make the point that on my part, I have particular questions about the modeling assumptions to be used to represent California ISO LSC import contracts from the greenhouse gas regions into the California ISO. So I think those need additional thought and explanation. Next slide, please. So just to summarize the most important observations I've made here, I definitely think that the California ISO should proceed forward with the EDAM proposal. I think that probably additional conceptual development is needed of the greenhouse gas model supported by empirical tests of alternative model designs. I think additional explanation and possibly additional conceptual development is needed to explain how market redispatch is going to occur to accommodate OAT transmission schedules and changes to WSPP schedules C injection locations following the IFM. These need to explain the procedures that would be used under a range of scenarios and the possible impacts on WEIM prices. One further thing I'd like to add here is this is particularly important because new OAT transmission service can continue to be written after the implementation of EDAM. So if there are holes in how, or opportunities to exploit holes in the treatment of OAT transmission scheduling, those could be amplified by parties who choose to write new OAT contracts. Next slide, please. I further think that additional explanation and possibly additional conceptual development is needed to understand how the WEIM RSC will be applied to the EDAM BA pool and the consequences if the pool fails the WEIM RSE. I also suggest that the CAISO consider a report to evaluate whether a reasonably well-functioning EDAM is going to need to account for resource-specific differences in resource reliability. So again, I think there are many, many strong features to the EDAM proposal. However, I think there are some specific areas of concern that the governing body should consider at this time. So that completes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Susan, thank you for those thorough remarks. And let me check with the governing body members to see if they have any questions or comments. Anita?
So I appreciate the report as well. What I would say is there are a number of things that you have identified that actually I think are going to get sorted in the implementation. So I really appreciate your summary comment that you do see support for this moving it ahead. And I do see a number of these things will be sorted through the stakeholder process as they continue to move forward on looking at what are the implementation of this. So a lot of this was a little bit farther down in the weeds, I would say, from a policy perspective. But I appreciate the points, and I'm sure staff will take a look at this.
Thank you, Anita.
John, no, Andy. And Jennifer.
Just really, I realize that we're, actually, I'm looking at my time, and I was thinking we were behind schedule, Rob, but I am, of course, on Mountain Time. So just really quickly, a clarifying question for Susan. Susan, you spent quite a bit of time focusing on your greenhouse gas focused concerns in the current proposal. But as I understand it, your recommendation to the governing body at this point is to support the EDM proposal going forward. And so my specific question is in regards to your greenhouse gas specific concerns. Are you in fact recommending that portion of EDM be delayed until your concerns, the concerns that you've identified are addressed? Or similar to the remarks that Anita just made, do you feel like these are issues that can be resolved through the implementation phase of this overall process for EDM?
I think all of these things can be resolved through the ongoing process for EDAM. I think for greenhouse gas in particular, that's an area where the CAISO should really engage the DMM, the MSC, potentially an outside expert to really evaluate the feasibility and the consistency of the results that the model is going to produce. It is a really complicated model. And, I think it requires, expertise to understand how to really evaluate how it will perform under a variety of situations. And maybe that's something that the CAISO and its contractor for the software can work through and present. But in some way, there needs to be an evaluation that is subject to a fairly high level of review by people who have a high level of expertise with these kinds of models.
Okay. Thank you, Susan, for that additional clarification.
And Anita has one more comment here.
So Susan, to your point on the greenhouse gas, and I think we've heard from stakeholders a lot about the greenhouse gas, and it's my understanding that the CalISO is going to gin up a working group on greenhouse gas specifically. So I think there is, I think everyone acknowledges that there's work to be done, and I think just in a short hallway conversation with Mark earlier today, there is going to be work on this issue. I think it's very serious. I think there are a lot of questions. But again, I think that the working group kind of process around this issue will be effective in regard to your comments, notwithstanding if they have to go out and get some extra expertise as well.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
And Susan, I do not have any additional questions. Jennifer pretty much asked the question I would have asked. So Susan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Your input and guidance here is appreciated. And I suspect that some of this might get addressed tomorrow and along with a lot of other elements. So with that, we're going to move on to our next agenda item.
Are we going to seek public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the correction. I somehow got carried away here. So thank you. So first I'll start and no public comments in the room. So Silas, can we check to see if any of the remote attendees have any public comments?
As a reminder to remote attendees, you can press the raise hand icon on WebEx or #2 on the phone only lines to enter the comment queue. All right, there are no comments in the queue at this time.
Silas, thank you very much. And so I apologize, everybody. It was just me getting a little off track and I'm trying to move the agenda forward. Before we move on to agenda item 8, I just wanted to comment, and this was recognized by Bonnie Blair when she called in, which is the process we are using with our market expert. We're not prepared today to present that, but we plan to, at our next meeting, put forth some more public information on our process that we will use and how we will implement the use of the ME. And as I previously noted, we're learning, and as we've gone through this now second time, I think there'll be some good takeaways on how we can improve how we engage the public and how we share information. So with that, agenda item 8 is the briefing on Assembly Concurrent Resolution 188. And, I'm getting used to the room for those of you. I'm looking over where Stacy is and I'm not seeing her. This will be Stacy Crowley, the Vice President of External Affairs. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Chair Conziolka and governing body members. I'm over here the right side. So really happy to be here to present an update on Assembly Concurrent Resolution 188, something a little less technical than what you just heard. So my first slide here, Christina, if you don't mind going to the next substantive slide, is just sort of a reminder of what we were asked to do by the California legislature. This resolution was unanimously supported at the legislature in the fall of last year. And really the intent was to recognize that a lot has changed in the West with regards to regional collaboration and coordination. And they note in the resolution a number of things that have occurred, such as the massive amount of new clean energy resources on the grid. They note the reliability challenges that WEC had done some estimating on. They recognized the amount of imports that California currently relies on, and that other states have had discussions and have changed their state policies and even looked at requiring their utilities to join RTOs. So all that said, it was just really, can you summarize all the work that has been done over the past couple of years, the reports and the communication that's happened, and really give the legislature a good indication of what's happening, and so they can deliberate on future discussions on this. So with that, the next slide, please. So the resolution asks us to work with other California balancing authorities to summarize these things that happen that I just described. And this is a map of the California balancing authorities. You probably know this, but it is important to note that they all have engaged in this work with us. And there are a couple of multi-state balancing authorities here. NV Energy has a small load in the Tahoe area and PacifiCorp in the northern part of California. But all of these balancing authorities have been working with us throughout the process. And we all agreed that having a third party author help us with this report would be important. And this author we selected was the National Renewable Energy Lab. They have been recognized as doing some of their own reporting on this, but they are a very neutral, objective body that can help us put all this together. So with the support of the California balancing authorities, we did contract with NREL, and they have been doing the majority of the work on this report. So next slide, please. So just a summary of what has occurred since the fall when this legislation was passed. We did assemble the group of balancing authorities and contracted with NREL. And then we immediately took the task of listing the studies that we think are relevant to the question that the California legislature asked. We posted that list of studies and we held a public call. And that public call was not only to introduce that list, but also to just provide an overview of what we plan to do over the next couple months. We did ask stakeholders to comment on the list of studies so that they could include other studies that we may not have recognized or comment on the studies that we provided as well. So all in all, NREL took those comments and they looked at 38 studies as they went through their analysis, which is quite a few, and put together a draft report. The draft report was posted in early January, and we held a public call in mid-January to discuss the draft report with stakeholders. We had, I think, over 190 folks on that call, so very well attended. And we are asking that, again, stakeholders provide their comments on the draft report by this Friday, February 3rd. We will work with NREL to collect those comments and assess them in order to refine the report. It is due to the legislature by February 28th of this year. So those are the sort of process steps, and then I'll go now into how the draft report is laid out and how NREL has been looking at this. So first of all, again, they really just looked at the summary, the studies that had all been done, and they summarized what was shown to really drive the current value of regional cooperation. And I list here 4 of the major topics. Of course, they get explained more further in the report, the draft report. Certainly climate change and grid stress related to extreme weather events certainly enhance the conversation in the West about coordination. State policies for electrification and transportation and other sectors. It's raising the load to some degree in states and changing the makeup of the resource mix. The transformation of the resource mix in California and the rest of the West. So we're seeing over the past several years, not only in California, but in other states, a high degree of clean energy resources getting onto the grid, including battery storage. And of course, declining planning reserve margins, especially in California Northwest. And again, that is due to the resource mix and how those things are accounted for in their processes. So next slide, thank you. Part of the question that the resolution puts forward is to identify what else has been happening around the West with regards to this conversation. And so I just list here the categories, but the draft report does list a full set of activities in all the Western states and sort of these group regional efforts. So there's regional groups that have conversations both in terms of education and really investigating possibilities for regional collaboration. That would include organizations like the Committee on Regional Electric Power Cooperation, that's called CREPC, and the Western Interconnection Regional Advisory Body, and other regional bodies that have really tried to look at this. And then, of course, probably the most recognized recent study on regional cooperation was called the State-Led Market Study. And this was something done by several states through a DOE grant, and that this was really a state-led study meant to explore the questions that state leaders had, commissioners, state energy advisors, and such. And they looked at exploring a number of different scenarios with regards to regional cooperation, and that's highlighted in this report. And then, of course, state-by-state efforts. We have states like Nevada and Colorado that did pass legislation to require their utilities to join an organized wholesale market. There are some caveats to those, but as a general sentiment from those states. Oregon had a study bill or asked the Oregon Department of Energy to look more into the benefits of regional cooperation. And Arizona has currently an open docket to investigate these things as they are evolving, both in terms of what the ISO is doing, as well as what Southwest Power Pool and things like the Western Resource Adequacy Program. So many states are really interested in what's going on and have been wanting to find out themselves all the various activities in the West. Next, NREL looks at sort of these frameworks, and the studies that they investigated range from technical to policy related to legal type studies. But they all really kind of hone in on a couple different frameworks. One, so an RTO, a sort of traditional regional transmission organization, both a single RTO or multiple in the West. Energy imbalance markets, as we know today here, both here at the ISO and the Southwest Power Pool with their WEIS. Day-ahead markets that we are considering tomorrow, and Markets Plus and SPP, as well as resource adequacy. And those are sort of the categories of frameworks that were investigated in these various studies. Next slide. So NREL poses the questions on this slide to help synthesize that body of literature, and they do an annotated summary of the literature with these questions in mind. I saw a typo here, but what does California and other Western states have to gain with these types of coordination activities? How well do the modes of regional collaboration achieve the benefits? And in an RTO, would the distribution of benefits change with various models? And finally, how options might uniquely affect California? So I'll go into how they look at the impacts to California just briefly. NREL notes that in these studies, really all regional market options increase the use of and the efficient dispatch of clean energy resources for California. And an RTO model provides really the most amount of benefits, and that's in that case. And all regional market options reduce West-wide greenhouse gas emissions across the board. We already recognize that the Western Energy Imbalance Market is reducing emissions. We do provide an assessment of that in our gross benefits reports that come out quarterly. California could see diminished reduction of those greenhouse gas reductions if entities decide to leave the WEIM to go to another market. So there's sort of a component of the risk of not cooperating and the fact that there are other options out there. California could see negative impacts there. And really all RTO options provide the greatest amount of greenhouse gas reductions as opposed to things like day ahead and real-time markets. And really, one of the questions, specific questions asked in the resolution was to look at transmission costs specific to California. And there really was no specific studies noting those type of costs. So we just noted that here to address the question in the resolution. A few more on the next slide, a few more of the impacts that were noticed here. A second RTO could reduce benefits to California, while other states may see more benefits. So again, this is if California does nothing and sees something develop to the east. There also could be reduced benefits if, again, entities chose to leave either EIM or EDAM and go to another market. Operating costs, there'd be less savings if there are two markets versus one. And resource adequacy definitely does provide benefits to California and the rest of the West. And it provide greater capacity savings to all. And again, single RTO is better than multiple. So back to the frameworks and how they assessed how these studies came out. A more comprehensive structure, again, RTO leads to greater benefits in terms of cost and decarbonization. And it does increase the breadth of issues though, right? So it's a little more complex structure, but it does provide more benefits. And the forms of less comprehensive do provide benefits, as we've seen with the EIM, but they're just less than an RTO would provide. And again, resource adequacy costs may decrease with coordinations such as the Western Resource Adequacy Program. Finally, the report does ask us to touch on what, if any, updates have been done to the Senate Bill 100 Joint Agency Report. So this is a report that the legislature asked of the Energy Commission, the California Public Utilities Commission, and the California Air Resources Board to do, and they are asked to do it every 4 years. Their first report was put out in 2021, so now we're in 2023. We do not have any updates to that 2021 report, but in our draft report with NREL, we do include a bit of a summary of what that 2021 report indicates, which looks at 3 scenarios for the state to meet its SB 100 goals. And in really all 3 cases, the capacity needs are increasing significantly in the state. There's a need for new transmission that could be in the billions across all 3 scenarios. And there are a greater reliance on imports with all 3 scenarios. So there are no new updates to provide, but just we do provide a summary of what was in that report. So all in all, I think we are really looking forward to the draft, the comments coming back from the draft report from stakeholders. And again, we will assess that with NREL and work to refine and complete that report and put it on the legislature's desk before the end of next month, February. Any information that we have put together is on a webpage we call Regional Solutions webpage. It's on the main ISO website, and you can see the draft report as well as the list of studies, a recording of the public meetings, et cetera. So that's my update on ACR 108. I'm happy to take any questions.
Stacey, thank you. I know this is a subject that a lot of people are following, participating in, and are very interested in the outcome of. I'm going to check, and Andy?
Thanks, Stacey, for this update. It's a very, very timely study. If you could have some questions just about the process, after the completion of the report, what kind of efforts will there be to sort of disseminate the results beyond the sort of the ISO, administered stakeholder type forums? Might there be California legislative hearings, other sort of stakeholder kind of presentations and other, just what are the thoughts around that? Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Member Campbell. So yes, we will have our own sort of public rollout of the report. We will hold a public call following the public report. But in terms of legislative updates, we certainly hope to provide briefings to the legislature as they request. We don't know exactly what that looks like yet. We have asked the author, Assemblyman Chris Holden, what he would like to do, and we will ultimately probably work with the the Assembly and the Senate Energy Committees to see, but we would like to get that information out. We will do outreach to the legislature independently of that, just to let them know that this is out there and make sure they have it. And then we'll do sort of West-wide outreach as we do with any important information. We have been asked to provide updates at public forums already, and we will likely have those requests come in when the report is finished, and we'll continue to get that out. And of course, it'll be posted on our website.
John, Nita, Jennifer. Okay. Stacey, we'll go.
Wonderful. No, actually, sorry, Rob, I do have a question. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, I still couldn't hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Just a really quick clarifying question, Stacey. First of all, thanks again for the information. And it's kind of as a follow-on to what Andy was asking in terms of potential next steps. You mentioned that, the ultimate, well, one of the goals here was to provide a summary of previous study work that's already been done in the space. And as you mentioned, there's been a lot of study work in the space. And so kind of assimilating this into one location is obviously going to be super helpful and can hopefully help inform future decisions in the regional market space. You did mention that one of the questions posed by the resolution was regarding the technical studies to address impacts to transmission costs that are specific to California. And as you mentioned in your remarks, you said that there were actually no technical studies available to provide a summary of. And so my question is, where a question was posed by the resolution that could not be answered by prior study work, do you sense that there could be interest in initiating a study to address that question potentially in the future? Because it seems to me that would be a really important question to have an answer to, whether you're in California or not. But I'm just curious if there's any indications that additional study work might come out of this process.
Thank you, Member Gardner. I guess I should clarify, there are no technical studies that specifically look at the cost of California. There are there's some analysis done in some of the studies, the 38 studies that were looked at about the benefits of regional cooperation in regards to transmission generally, right? So it's recognized that when you have a more regional planning organization looking across a broader footprint, you have efficiencies across that footprint, right? So there's inherently benefits to California if they are part of a larger regional transmission planning effort. So I should just note that. And that will be, I think, one of the things that we found in the draft report that we need to tease out a little bit more. So I think we plan to do that. But we haven't heard of any interest, although there might be, in doing more technical studies. It's very difficult because you have to kind of know what you're planning for, right? So if the market footprint is, one other utility or 6 other utilities and where they're located, it all really matters. And so the assumptions in those, in what would be a technical report would be very difficult to assume. And that is noted in the report already, that it is very difficult without knowing the specifics to get specific with transmission costs.
Okay, thanks, Stacey.
I'm going to confirm there does not appear to be any public comments in the room. So Silas, let's go to those participating remotely to see if they have any public comments.
To those participating remotely, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on your telephone keypad. There are no comments in the queue at this time.
Silas, thank you. And Stacey, thank you.
Sure.
Our next agenda item is number 9, and that is a briefing on the WEIM governing body planning calendar. And this will be presented by Anna McKenna.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Konzioka and governing body members. I'm happy to run through you what work is ahead of you this year. So we can go to the next slide. So for tomorrow, I don't think I have to say much about it. Got a busy day. We'll be taking a few important items to you under joint authority, both the WEIM governance proposal as well as the extended day ahead market enhancements. Under the recommendation of advisory authority, we will be also asking for your advisory opinion on transmission service and scheduling priorities. We also will be providing a briefing tomorrow to both you and the Board of Governors on the day ahead market enhancements, which we do recommend be under joint authority and will be coming to a theater near you before long. So that one we'll explain more tomorrow. We have decided to delay the request for an authority until later this year after some additional time. But tomorrow you'll get an opportunity to have a briefing on that. And then the usual briefings will be had tomorrow as they are listed there. And as noted, actually, we will be providing an additional briefing on ACR 188 again tomorrow on that. For the March meeting, we have two items that are currently under proposed joint authority as well. The first is a decision on a market parameter change, which is a parameter that we use in our software in the market clearing process for purposes of determining pricing as well as the solution of the market as well. That will be proposed in the joint authority because it affects both markets. So it's a market feature in the real-time market as well. Market Surveillance Committee appointment will also happen in March, and so that will also be under your joint. And then again, we'll have the usual briefings. Nothing notable if you wish in the normal briefings for that month. Next slide, please. For the rest of the year, I think we don't have too many items yet listed for Q3 and Q4. I covered the March meeting, which you see under Q2 on this slide. But we are also working quite hard right now on prioritizing as well as defining our next steps on the roadmap. And as you see on this slide, we will actually be providing you a briefing. I believe it's in the joint session in May for the policy initiative. So in the second quarter, we hope to be able to provide you that briefing as well on the roadmap. I did want to note, since the RIF gave its briefing earlier today, we are working with the brief already to have it, and we have a discussion scheduled in February on the roadmap with them. So some work being done along those lines already. But we'll be hoping to brief you on that in the second quarter of 2023. And we don't have any items yet listed, as I noted, for the third and fourth quarter, but I am sure we'll be keeping your agendas full. So more to come.
Thank you, Anna. We appreciate that. And I'm just going to check with the governing body members. Any questions or comments? Jennifer, I'm just checking with you as well.
None at this time. Thank you, Rob.
Okay. I see there's no public comments in the room. Silas, can we go to and check on remote attendees if they have any public comments?
Remote attendees can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on their telephone keypad. No comments in the virtual queue at this time.
Thank you. Our last agenda item is on informational report. And are there any questions on the posted informational reports? And the governing body members say none. So I'd just like to thank everyone for attending today. I appreciate everyone's time, your interest and involvement. And hopefully we'll look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow morning at the joint meeting. And as a reminder, that is at 9:30 Pacific Standard Time. So we stand adjourned. Thank you.